Robinson has stated that he is going to stay in the race, but what about the Republicans? What about the ones who specifically endorsed him?
What I can tell you is what I didn't have on my bingo card was did he get arrested this week and then this today. I know for sure that I am not a fortune teller, but this is damaging to the Republican Party. I mean, he's at the top of the ticket. And so obviously he can't remove himself, or can he? Because with the RFK thing that just happened, you can't. There's a lot of things that are in that situation, but we know that these ballots are going out instantly. And so if he wanted to remove himself, the deadline is today. Anyone that voted for him and has concern, they're raising their voice right now. I mean, before the CNN thing went off, my phone was blowing up from a lot of Republicans saying, hey, we're hearing that there's internal bickering within the party. What's going on? What's going on? And so when this dropped, a lot of folks assumed that he was stepping away from the race. Him doubling down and saying, no, I'm not stepping down. That's exactly what you want. I mean, you want to confront any type of issue head on and say, I have confidence in my candidacy. However, his race was already dwindling statistically from every poll across the state. And so this puts Republicans in a very, very peculiar situation.
And just to let our viewers understand that, and this is the first time that I can think of in my history of covering news that you hear about a big story coming before the story actually comes and everybody panicking as to how they're going to handle it. So when you look at now what CNN has reported, I have a simple question for you. Can this end a campaign?
It should have ended the campaign. In other years, this would have been a death blow to a campaign. But I think what the former President Trump has done has shifted the way that we as an American people look at types of scandals like this. And so when you have the allegations of making comments, he's made these types of comments in the past. The problem is there's a lot of contradictory comments that are in there. I mean, he's made anti-LGBT comments in the past, but on this site, they're making allegations that he's making comments that he's into LGBTQ activity, which is contradictory and directly goes against what he stood on maybe for the last 18 months. And so typically, if a candidate shows things or is being contradictory to what they've campaigned on, that normally would end your campaign. And then if you're pushing for black voters, if across the state you're talking about how do I get to black voters, if you're saying that slavery should come back, if you're saying that you'd call Martin Luther King names that are different than what his name is, I think it unpacks a lot of problems for the top of the ticket at the Republican Party. And so historically, this would have ended the candidacy. I just don't think we're in that era anymore.
So you touched upon this briefly. I mean, the timing of this article dropping by CNN isn't a coincidence. I mean, the deadline, if he wanted to drop out, would be tonight. So what happens next here? I
mean, the ball is still in his court. I mean, I can guarantee that after he got off that CNN interview, that was not the end of the conversation for the day. Because if other folks are recognizing that today is the deadline and that this story is coming, because if you look at the story,
ballots have already been reprinted.
Right, they've been reprinted. But this story was given his campaign on Tuesday. So they knew on Tuesday that this was coming down the pipeline. And so you talk about operative work where the other opponent is out there working and trying to find dirt. But then you talk about internal politics of the party. Folks within the party are saying, are you bringing the party down? Because not only is there a governor's race, there's still a presidential race that's happening. And so you got to think bigger picture. And then you have those down ballot ticket things that are there. So a lot of the concerns are, can we win the governor's race, but can we also win some of these other seats? And right now, if that becomes problematic, and if it makes more sense to step away, the calls, the pushes will be to step away. But as you mentioned, the timeline is ticking.
All right, Khalif, I have to ask you this, though. With this explosive information that came out, I have the CNN article right here of what we're seeing. When Robinson was interviewed by CNN of giving his statement as to how he wanted to deny these allegations, he blamed artificial intelligence. And when the reporter then said, but you have so many times where this username of Mini Soldier is being used and we're showing you that, could all of this be made up?
I mean, I've seen some wild videos, some wild audio things that artificial intelligence is able to create. What I think CNN did when they did their research was they went back. They went back and they cross-referenced not just the usernames, but the usernames with the geographical information, the usernames with stuff that he's talked about at the time, talking about his mother, working at an HBCU, and then he was posting it on those
Some of the reviews on Amazon that he gave were
about
the same
products, about helicopters. And so the cross-referencing that they did, I think I love watching investigations for when law enforcement do it, and on journalism, it's the exact same way. You go backwards and you follow the crumbs. And I think if you look at all of the work they did ensuring, because you want to get this right.
Right.
You don't want to make these allegations. It's just one website.
You can't.
They cross-referenced it like 5 and 6 times. And when they asked him about it, he brought up the AI, and they said, well, you're talking about AI 5 and 6 and 7 years ago. To his point, if someone wanted to use AI, they could use AI to create something from a long time ago.
But also, too, when he was questioned about it, Khalif, he said, and then he pushed back and said, I don't know.
What I can tell you is what's also telling is when you look at the interview, a lot of his responses were we. This is not us. This is not what we do. He never really said, this is not me. And multiple times he said we. To any question, this is not the way we talk. This is not our voice, which would tells me that the individuals that wrote this for him, his response, his how do I come back to this type of attack, they didn't have time to prep him to say, look, you have to own these words. And that also can be problematic because he's a very boisterous person. He's someone that stands on his words. And that interview, that response was not him.
Well, it also was a little surprising, too, that he said all of it that he denied. There wasn't like, hey, you know what, portion this. Well, I know I didn't.
Got to deny the whole thing.
Like,
Got to deny the whole
thing. It was just very much across the board.
It'll definitely be interesting to see how Republicans and particularly the Trump campaign responds to this because they endorsed him as well. Khalif, thank you.